Hello and welcome everyone. Today on Skylines Summer Sessions, myself and Richard Hooper are joined by Irish MVP Joe Carlyle. And among other things, Joe is an Azure Architect at Evros Technology in Dublin. Welcome, Joe. Great to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Greg.
No worries. Today you're going to tell us about Azure Firewall. So to kick things off, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself and the kind of work that you do.
Sure. Thanks for that. Very sort of lovely introduction. As you said, my name is Joe. I'm an MVP in Cloud and Data Center Management. I'm a relatively new MVP. I was awarded last year, and I'm currently, as it being June, sitting with my fingers crossed, hoping for a July 1st renewal. Same as the lads here as well. I work with Evros Technology Group, so my main role or my main work day to day is Azure Solution Architecture. So that's designing application stacks, that's designing infrastructure elements. It also is a component of sort of mentoring some of the juniors on the team, as well as sort of upskilling a little bit when it comes to clients, and sort of basically anything and everything to do with Azure, right? So it's a very fun role, nice and changing, always sort of using different components of the tech in different ways. So I find that because of all the clients, you get to look at aspects of Azure in different ways, which means that you get frustrated or delighted by them in different ways, right? Depending on what the project is or what's happening relative to it at the time. So it's great from the insights side of things. Like you can really get an honest view of the platform and its strengths and some of the weaknesses that are there, right? So you can help a lot with that. On the community side of things, I'm very similar to you guys. Do a bit of blogging on We Do Azure, fairly active on Twitter, trying to chat to the rest of the sort of Azure community and wider on that as well. So it's kind of even like my Twitter handle, right? We Do Azure. It's Azure, and then any other tech, right? I suppose. So kind of broad interest. But that's basically it, right? That's me in a nutshell, I guess, when it comes to this.
Awesome. Sounds good. So you're going to talk to us today about Azure Firewall. What I would like to know is there like an industry certification for it, or like, is it like other firewalls sort of?
Yeah, so one of the big, I suppose, announcements or changes this year with Azure Firewall is that it was certified by the ICSA Labs as a corporate firewall, which is something that you would expect when you look at other vendor firewalls, and it was a sort of a significant step for Azure Firewall, as it's kind of one of the newer services on the kind of IaaS stream in the platform. It's also certified by, like PCI, SOC, ISO, all the other kind of standard ones you'd expect as part of Azure. And then there's a load of the minors as well. So yeah, that pretty much covers it off, I guess, in terms of certification. So it has what you'd want it or you'd expect it to have.
Awesome. That's cool.
So Joe, in terms of features, should I be using Azure Firewall instead of something like Front Door or what?
So it depends on your exact application stack, but Azure Firewall is used to protect virtual network resources, right? With something like Front Door, it's much more PaaS focused. So something like an app service is what you're protecting, not dependent on a VNet, a little bit more flexible on that side of things. But you can integrate Firewall with another service, say like Application Gateway, which is also has the ability to NAT into a VNet. And you'll even see if you're looking at any of the sort of complementary services for Firewall that Microsoft do recommend or encourage that you actually combine some of the services together, whether they be third party and Azure Firewall or some of the platform native products and Azure Firewall as well. So there's a lot of this product and another one so that you're using the platform to the best of its ability for each of the services that do what they do best, right? Like Front Door, which is web protection with a WAF, etc. So it's a combination, and it's specific or dependent on your unique application stack.
Okay.
Nice. So if I have like more than one Azure Firewall, can I centrally manage them, or is it just one per?
Yeah, sure. You can. You can, but maybe not yet if it's production, right? So there's a service that's been released called Azure Firewall Manager. It's still in preview, but what it allows you to do is centrally manage the process, the policies and the rules that you apply to your Azure firewalls. So if you have 2, 10, 50, it doesn't matter. You create your central policies in Firewall Manager, and then you create hub virtual networks, which basically inherit those policies and have Azure firewalls within them. So it's a nice sort of simple process for that. It's something I'd wish, I don't know if anyone has ever struggled with network security groups at scale. It's something I'd wish they'd introduced for that. It would make life maybe a little bit easier. But yeah, so no, it's in preview. So yeah, absolutely, you can centrally manage them. Just obviously with it being in preview, you've no SLA or anything, so avoid it for production for now.
Cool. Okay. So, Joe, I believe you've got a demo on some slides. If you want to go
Yeah,
and see your screen,
sure. Sure. So let's go with the screen. So I've got a couple of slides, and then as part of the slides, I've got a little bit of a demo at the end, because I suppose with Azure Firewall, it's a little bit tricky to demo a live or an interesting environment, because look, you need loads of traffic to get the good stuff, and to do that I need to share a live environment, and look, I can't do that. Right. So Firewall, it sits amongst, I suppose, all of these sort of component network resources that Azure has, right? And there's loads of them. For anyone who's seen any of the sort of networking sessions I've ever done before, I go on about the absolute amount of them that there is, and this is just some of them, right? But obviously today we're going to focus on our friend Azure Firewall. So the first thing, I guess, is, even though we've talked about it a bit, is to understand what it is exactly as a service or a resource type. It's a firewall as a service, which means it's basically a basic firewall component that sits within your Azure infrastructure. It's built in high availability, right? So the platform actually manages its resilience for you as part of the overall config and cost. It also has unrestricted cloud scalability. Again, that's platform managed for you, so that if the load increases, it has the capability to scale out to support that. And finally, its function, or its main component, is to protect your virtual network resources, right? This is, while it is somewhat of a platform resource, it does sit directly within your virtual network. And as a result, that's its key sort of goal when it comes to a service, right? So as a firewall service, I guess the next part to understand is, how does it work, right? And we've already kind of asked some or certain sort of components in terms of extra functionality with it, but the absolute basics, right? If we look at a simple network architecture, well, kind of simple network architecture like this one, we've got separate tiers or subnets within our virtual network. And to understand how firewall works, we've got to focus on specific components of that. So that's the firewall itself and virtual network routing, right? So very quickly, I'm going to go over some of the virtual network sort of components or basic understanding that you would need to be able to add a firewall to your environment as it stands. And the first one of those is this slide, right, which a lot of people might have already seen. It is the basic, I suppose, pattern of software-defined networking in Azure. And to not get completely into that, Azure is a layer 3 software-defined network, so it has the ability to have this logical layered isolation. And the pattern of how resources are accessed, depending on where they're coming from, works in these layers, right? When it comes to Azure Firewall, though, what we're specifically going to talk about for networking in Azure and routing today, to understand just that key component of how you integrate it, are these 3 components here: deployments, virtual appliances, and UDRs from those sections. Deployments are obviously your resources you're protecting. The NVA in this instance is going to be Azure Firewall, and the UDRs are custom route tables or user-defined routes, and that's how we actually force or manipulate traffic to use Azure Firewall as opposed to the defaults in the environment. So in a virtual network in Azure, we have a system route table, and this is what happens by default, right? We have an address space and a subnet, and the system route table is created by default and managed for us by the system. When we want to introduce something like Azure Firewall, we have to take over this route table to a point and manipulate what happens to certain components of the traffic. And one that's really, really common is that 0/0 route on screen, the send to internet. Most of the time, you want that traffic to either be blocked or protected or filtered, at least in some way. So what we'll do is we'll introduce a service called Custom Route Table. Really, really simple resource, very, very easy to use. These guys have a one-to-one association with a subnet, as in any subnet can only have a custom route table applied to it, but you can apply multiple or sorry, you can apply a custom route table to multiple subnets, right? So you can use them at scale. So in this instance, we have a custom route table with our 0/0 route, and we're going to send it to a virtual appliance, which is going to be our Azure Firewall, its IP, and we apply it to subnet 1, right? And what happens is, when we actually apply that custom route table object to that subnet, the system table gets updated, and it gets updated to this. So you'll note that the 0/0 route that was originally a default source is now inactive. And our new 0/0 route, which is sending to a virtual appliance, has gone to a state of active. That's because a user or a custom route table will always take preference once the prefix matches. So that's it, right? It's from a routing perspective, all you're doing is applying custom route tables to your virtual network to make sure, or to manipulate traffic to flow to Azure Firewall instead of any of the default routes. Right, so that's the simplest sort of way of explaining how you would integrate Azure Firewall at the routing layer. But once you have it integrated in the environment, then the next key component is to understand what you should configure on an Azure Firewall. So if we look at that, we have these sort of list. I'm going to go through the first 3 on the slides, and then the last 3 I'll show in a little demo. So the first aspect that we always want to configure is diagnostics. That's because an Azure Firewall is going to be one of the key resources in your environment. It's going to have all your traffic flowing through it, protection. You want to be able to understand what has happened, or be able to look real time and see if a rule is working or not. And the only way to do that is with diagnostic settings. You enable these to, say, stream to log analytics. And as a result, then, if you have any familiarity with it, you're able to go through those logs, get great insight into what's actually happening. So because it's kind of tricky to show in a live environment, what I've done is I've taken a snapshot from a demo environment that I ran a load of traffic through, and you can get details like this from in this screenshot, the application logs, which show FQDN traffic coming in or being denied by policy, and you can essentially look at any level of detail you want within the environment from that component. So it's really, really powerful because, of course, you have the full weight of log analytics behind you for all of that diagnostics data. The next component is one of the interesting or key aspects of Azure Firewall, which is threat intelligence. This is a dynamic service that's built off Microsoft's Threat Intelligence Service, which is a machine learning sort of component of the overall environment. What this allows you to do is turn the service on in one of 3 ways. So it's either off, right? So you don't use it. It's in audit mode, which just logs anything that it flags, or it's in audit and deny, which means that anything it flags, it will actually deny traffic for. And an example of that, I guess, is if we look at our log analytics again, what I've done here is taken a snapshot of the threat intelligence log and showed you the traffic that's being denied by it. And you can see that it also gives you a message in terms of why it's denying the traffic. So this is a sort of a managed service that sits outside your own rules. So Azure Firewall blocks everything by default. You then allow what rules you want in. But in this instance, what it's doing is blocking traffic before it actually gets to your rules. So this is a sort of root level or top level rule when it comes to your firewall that says, no, this traffic shouldn't be allowed at all whatsoever. And here's the reason why, right? So it's a known phishing indicator, or it's something specific that the service itself has picked up on. And this could be from multiple tenants, right? This isn't just based on your own. That's the beauty of threat intelligence. It's sort of globally sourced information. The next component then are metrics. And look, this is, fairly simple, but sometimes people forget this component or this part of it. When it comes to metrics, if Azure Firewall becomes the central sort of hub for your environment when it comes to routing and protection, you want to make sure that this thing is working as it should. So just an example from that is one of the metrics that are available, which is firewall health state. And if you look at it over an average aggregation, you'll see that one is on 100%. Always nice to go in here and enable a little alert rule off that metric to ensure that if the health state drops, say for example below 100 or 99% or whatever, in case there's a blip, that you're getting alerted for that, because again, the firewall as a key component within the resource, within your environment, if you've sort of integrated it with all of that routing. The last components then are these three, which is actually sort of how you apply configuration directly into the firewall, right? So NAT rules, network rules, and application rule collections. So for these ones, I'm going to first show you sort of it's a graphical representation of where the firewall sits again. So you can understand that there's all of these services going on around firewall, but we're going to configure them basically off three simple rule collections. And to do that, I'm going to switch to another screen or another. Yep. Here we go. So this is a firewall in my environment. One of my sort of test environments, right? So there's no actual traffic here. From a rules perspective, we've got some basics in place already just to show the config that's applied, right? And in here, we've got NAT rules. So these allow traffic from somewhere else via the firewall to a target. And here we have a really simple one, which is essentially just an allow RDP rule into a single server with all sort of fictional IP addresses, right? And it's very, very straightforward to add another rule or remove this or modify it. And that's one of the beauties of Azure Firewall is the simplicity of this configuration. It's very, very familiar again, because it's following these standard sort of Azure portal GUI, which people find quite intuitive. The second one then is network rule collections. And in here we have a collection called allow services with two rules already, through DNS and NTP. And I suppose in this example, say we could add allow FTP and the source, or sorry, protocol will be TCP or source type, just because you might have an issue where you have a scale. There's a service called IP groups where you want to manage this a little bit more complex environment. There's a service called IP groups. What they allowed you to do is create a separate object that contain multiple IP addresses or ranges, right? So in this instance, I have an IP group which has my application servers in it. So I select that as my source. My destination type is an IP address, which is fictional. And we want to go out to say port 22 for FTP. And we can save. And what happens is that rule will be added into that collection and update with the same priority that the collection has, right? So very, very simple to add in something straight away, modify rules, etc. The network rule collections are all based on IP addresses. The application rule collection, and here we don't have any at the moment, but we're going to create one. These are all based on FQDNs. And there's two components. One of the components is based on Microsoft FQDN tags, which are all listed here, right? So you can allow, say, a specific service out without having to sort of open something a bit more widely or manage, say, the IP addresses required for something like Windows Update, right? You can just use the FQDN tag and Microsoft will manage it for you as part of the service. So here we're going to allow, for our demo, we'll go allow blogs, right? And our target FQDNs, let's go Greg, source type IP address. We want all our websites to be able to get the Greg. Let's go star dot, and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, gregorsuttie.com. Are you?
Yep.
Yeah, lovely. Right, and we'll go again. We go rich. Again, all our services, HTTPS, pixelrobots.co.uk, and I can't leave myself out. So all our servers, HTTPS, start out we do Azure.ie. Right, so very quickly, we're going to allow a new blog rule. We give it a priority of 200. We have our FQDNs applied as part of that. Add, and the application rule collection will be created for us. The rules within it will be created for us. And then as soon as that collection saves, those servers that are controlled or manipulated to route via Azure Firewall will now be able to get out to those outstanding websites without any difficulty. So very, very straightforward, very, very simple. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to jump back to the presentation, bring us back to this network architecture. So at the start, when we kind of talked about that part of it, we talked about how it integrates, or what are the kind of components, right, that are required to integrate it. And we covered off the route table side of it, right, which is how you'd actually get a firewall to be used by your environment. And then we covered off some of the configuration components of Azure Firewall itself, or the key ones that you want to make sure you get in place or get an understanding of and get right. And that's pretty much it, right? That is Azure Firewall when it comes to your environment.
Awesome. Nice and easy, really. Nice GUI-based system.
Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong.
Combine something like Service Endpoints with Azure Firewall.
Absolutely. So to explain it from here, say, for example, if we had our business tier, let's use a laser pointer, make it easier. Here we go. If we had our business tier and it was trying to access a storage account for something like log shipping or kind of temporary storage or something, but we have all our routes for all of these services pointing to Azure Firewall, what we can do is the subnet that sits as part of, or controls, excuse me, Azure Firewall, we can add the service endpoints for something like storage to that. So when the traffic from the business tier routes to Azure Firewall, it, instead of it sending it out to the internet to come back into the storage account, it can use the service endpoint in this subnet and redirect it straight to the storage account, remaining on the Azure backbone, which means that your route tables are really simple, but you're also still getting the benefits of a service like service endpoints on the VNet. So a nice combo again of services there.
Cool. So earlier you sort of showed us how you can filter, like, or allow websites out from your VMs, but can you like sort of do inbound traffic filtering as well with the firewall?
Yeah, so there you have the ability to do NAT traffic, right, which essentially allows any port that you want into the environment. But if you wanted to do something, say, more advanced and you were looking at, say, web traffic, again, that's where you'd want to look at something that has a layered aspect to it, like application gateway. So you could use a WAF, which has a much more robust set of rules against it and is able to actually inspect the traffic from that sort of web sphere, right, to ensure that the traffic that is coming in is not just port and protocol matched, but it's also actually not up to anything it shouldn't be, right? So it's being assessed by a no-WASP rule set. So again, it's sort of a repetition of that combined services element makes the best use of each of the services together.
Awesome. Okay, so Joe, we've got some last couple of fun questions.
Right, okay.
So just a couple. So Joe, we met at Ignite last year, and I kind of wanted to get your overall impression of what you thought of Ignite. And once everything's back to normal, would you recommend people attend conferences like Ignite?
Well, I'm actually, funny enough, I'm wearing the T-shirt from that Ignite session. Yeah, do you know what? I think it's one of the better conferences that you could attend. There's obviously a huge effort to, well, for us that are based in say Europe, there's a huge effort to get over there for the week, if the time difference, family away, etc., all that. But overall, I don't think you can learn as much on anything else. It's an immersion, right, in all of the software, all of the kind of people, etc., you want to meet. Everybody's there, everybody's focused for the week. So the sessions alone are brilliant, right, to see some of the speakers that you get to see. The on the floor sort of component of it too, where you get to actually talk to the product groups, that's a level of interaction that you just can't get anywhere else either. But then the networking side of it, where whether it be some sort of like a event or a coffee or even just bumping into people, right, that's almost as good, if not better, than the other parts. You know, you meet the people that you're chatting to on Twitter. If you're like you, Greg, you're able to spot them from 400 yards away, right? I'm terrible at that. I could be walking past someone and don't recognize them. But it's brilliant. The people you bump into, it is just unbelievable. And everyone is in the same mindset. So everybody's really friendly. Everybody wants to chat. And, for all sort of personality types, it's just really, really welcoming as a community event. But also the tech side of it, then again, is brilliant. So yeah, 100% recommend it, no doubt.
Yeah, it was such a good event. Definitely can't wait to go again. So you've done quite a few Azure exams. They're sort of redoing quite a few of them now. You got any plans to retake, or you just gonna...
Yeah, I suppose I have I guess all the ones that are relevant to my role, right? So I've the architect, the security one, the DevOps one, the admin one. So I don't have the dev, and I don't have any of the speciality ones like AI or anything like that. I did sit the new admin beta, the 104, obviously proctored because of the current crisis. I found it good. I think the updates are clever. I think it's adapting as it should, right? So when they came live first, I thought the changes to role-based, I thought it was very clever. I thought it was a much tighter exam, like a much more focused exam than, say, the previous iterations, like 533, I think it was the one that the admin replaced. And I think the new version of it is very good. I think it's adapted again more kind of tightly towards the role, which is, I suppose, what you want. I've started looking at the architect replacement ones, so 303 and 304, I think are the two new ones. I've started looking at them. I think they're supposed to arrive July, I think the learning blog says, or something like that, sort of end of June, July. So I will sit them, I guess, when they come out in beta, or I might wait. I suppose the betas are great, right? Because you get to obviously just, sit the exam. For anyone worried about cost, it's a cheaper way of doing it. You don't get scored immediately, which is sometimes a nuisance for people. They don't really like that. But the one thing about it is, I don't know if people have noticed, but on a beta exam, there's no labs. So if you really, really hate labs, beta might be a way to get in past them. But if you like the labs, which I had actually really enjoyed in which one was it? I think it was the 400. You might want to wait until they're out of beta, because obviously they can't confirm certain parts of it until the beta is finished and the feedback is there. So yeah, I might wait for those ones just to do the lab components part as well of those exams, because I only sat the transition for the architect one, so I've never actually had to sit the two together. So it'd be nice, interesting sort of challenge, I guess, when it comes to it. But I think they're great. I think everyone should be sitting them who's kind of working in the space, definitely.
Awesome. Well, good luck on the 104 and the other ones.
Yeah, thanks.
But I think we pretty much reached the end of the time we have today. So thanks for taking part. It's been awesome. I've learned a hell of a lot about Azure Firewall. So cheers. I'm going to go and look a bit more into that.
Yep. Thanks for having me. That was great, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.